There are letters where a woman will come to her deceased husband's tomb, and she'll say, "Excuse me, didn't you say that your son should inherit these plots of land? Now look, your brother is coming and saying that it's his son's." Or a woman will come and she will say to her deceased parents, "Please help me conceive. Don't you want your household, to live on?"
Ramses struggles with greater concerns. He yearns to become the most powerful pharaoh the world has ever seen, and starts by immortalizing himself with epic construction projects. He has to prove himself at Thebes. The city is already Egypt's showcase, with more than 50,000 citizens. At its center stands the great Temple of Karnak, the most sacred place in the kingdom, because it's home to the imperial god, Amun. At Karnak, Ramses' predecessors built monumental pylons, a sacred lake and boulevards. On the west side of the river stand the gigantic mortuary temples of the deceased pharaohs. How can Ramses surpass all this? How can he leave behind an even greater legacy? He has the resources, he just needs time. As if obsessed, he starts with his tomb, carefully planning it to the last detail. The work will take many years. He relies on specialists, master builders, masons, craftsmen. They have their own department in the administration of southern Egypt. They report to Ramses, who reports to the pharaoh. To finalize the layout of the tomb's interior, Ramses presents a floor plan, noting all corridors and halls they want to dig for Ramses in the Valley of the Kings. Stone tombs demand perfect planning. Anything less would jeopardize the pharaoh's chances of reaching the afterlife. It's an enormous responsibility for Ramses to shoulder, but Pharaoh puts his trust in him. Like any royal burial vault, the crypt is more than a resting place. It also preserves the world order and must not be desecrated. Deep drop shafts and fake walls are designed to foil grave robbers. The royal mummy must stay hidden forever. The pharaoh needs his body to cross the borders to eternity. Without a mummy, there is no afterlife. The unfinished reliefs in the front of the tomb are a bluff, so burglars think the grave wasn't used. A hidden floor leads to the burial chamber, which conceals the pharaoh's sarcophagus. Beneath the mummy, another enormous tunnel leads to the underworld and eternal life. The tomb builders lived in a village called Setma'at, or Place of the World Order, near the Valley of the Kings, on a dry and unwelcoming patch of ground. Despite being only a few kilometers from Thebes, workers here are completely cut off from the outside world.
One theory is that the ancient Egyptians who lived here were sequestered because they were involved in work on royal tombs, and what they were doing had to be kept confidential. Not all Egyptologists like that idea. Another theory is that they were working with raw materials of great value, silver and gold and ebony and ivory and other precious materials that had to be watched over. And here, in this walled-in community with guards on the only entrance, it would have been possible to better protect these raw materials from theft.
In Ramses' time, 25 families, Egypt's most talented artists and craftsmen, live in the 80 houses of Setma'at. All their food and tools must be carried over the mountains to their village, and Ramses records each delivery in great detail, before handing out the supplies. At Setmaat, Ramoses is the pharaoh's eyes and ears, maintaining order here so that Pharaoh would be able to claim his place in the world beyond.
This is a house very much like the house that Ramoses probably lived in. He was certainly a VIP in this village, being in charge of the workforce, carving and decorating the tomb of Ramses II. He was one of the most important people around here. And one could assume that he would come into this house at the end of the day and kiss his loving wife, climb these stairs up to the roof, where he could relax in the sweet breath of the north wind, while his wife, down here in the kitchen, heated up the oven, baked some fresh bread for him, added some spices for dipping, and took those in a couple of bowls of rather thick beer up to the roof for Ramoses, her husband, to relax at the end of the day. All of this, of course, accompanied by screaming children and barking dogs and the usual things that one finds in villages in Egypt even today.
Much of what we know about Ramoses and his village was pulled from the village rubbish tip. Egypt's trash is an archaeologist's treasure. Thousands of pottery shards speak volumes about life here more than 3,000 years ago. These fragments of clay and limestone were once notebooks and sketch pads. They show how the villagers lived. A mother suckling a baby. A woman applying makeup in front of the mirror. A young boy tending pigs. A farmer leading a cow. A worker's life isn't easy. Ramoses and his men trudge 4 kilometers down a narrow path to the worksite in the Valley of the Kings. Donkeys carry their tools, their bread, their beer, and everything they need for their 10-day work week away from the village. They make their camp at the foot of a gigantic natural pyramid. Ramoses records his inventory and notes who's sick. Reporting on who's on leave and how the project's progressing. Women generally aren't part of the workforce, but Ramoses' wife, Mutamwija, sometimes brings wine or dates from the village, a welcome change from the usual fare. The laborers are sworn to secrecy, but stories of the treasures hidden in the Valley of the Kings manage to slip out. Below ground lies a hidden village of the dead. This gigantic labyrinth of tombs held 14 generations of kings during Ramses' times, and later would contain more than 60 so-called houses of eternity. Some lie buried more than 400 meters into the stone. A fortune lay concealed inside these chambers, looted long ago. The only complete royal grave treasure recovered in modern times belonged to one of Ramses' predecessors, Tutankhamun. His tomb contained more than 5,000 objects, a fortune in gold, several royal beds, a golden chariot, statues of gods, and a jewel-encrusted throne for the pharaoh who died when he was only 20 years old. What robber could resist the lure of this subterranean treasure city?
There were several guardhouses posted around the Valley of the Kings. Because of the steep hills that surround the valley, they have pretty well unobstructed views and can see anybody coming into the valley from quite some distance away.
In spite of precautions, cunning robbers still infiltrate the valley, unseen by the guards. Some even manage to break into the royal tombs or the warehouses, earning an ill-gotten fortune. Tomb raiding is usually an inside job. With no master plan of the Valley of the Kings, looters probably get information from Ramoses' workmen.
stealing their goods was one thing, but actually to go and destroy the body, to take off the jewelry, break up the coffin, that was considered the absolute worst, because these people now had also no chance for an afterlife.
Ramoses, ultimately responsible for the site's security, does all he can to find and punish the informers. His failure to prevent the plundering won't sit well with Ramses. The construction of their pharaoh's tomb has suddenly become a top priority. Egypt has mobilized for war, and the crew must finish before harm comes to Ramses. Danger lurks at the borders of the empire. The Hittites, arch enemies of the Egyptians, are expanding their territory, and they're getting dangerously close to Egypt. Ramses, as Egypt's commander-in-chief, cannot look on idly as his forces gird for war. He must leave Queen Nefertari. She is only one of his many wives, but she is his great royal bride, the mother of his heir. The vizier and the officials will take the reins of government until the pharaoh returns. Ramses strikes out to the north with 20,000 warriors, the biggest army Egypt has ever mustered, to protect the frontiers of his empire. After 1 month, they close in on the Hittite troops, based near the city of Kadesh, in today's Syria. In Egypt, people are worried about the war's outcome. Ramses is nowhere near achieving his grand ambition of constructing the empire's greatest monuments, and his own tomb is far from ready. Because their pharaoh is risking his life in war, the workers have redoubled their efforts. While the stoneworkers smash the shafts deeper into the limestone at the back of the tomb, the front sections are being plastered and painted. Ramoses drives his men relentlessly. It isn't enough to work fast. They have to work carefully as well, because every detail of a tomb must be exactly right.
Well, the Egyptians themselves, I think, clearly thought that preparations like the decoration of a tomb and the furnishing of a tomb were essential if they were going to have a safe journey into the afterlife.
A pharaoh's death can bring chaos unless he passes successfully to the afterlife. For that, the paintings and hieroglyphics must be perfect. Even in death, the pharaoh must maintain order in the world of the living. Ceiling paintings show how the god of the sky, Nut, swallows the sun in the evening, ferries her through the 12 hours of night, and gives birth to her the next morning, heralding a new day. Thus, the Valley of the Kings is more than a royal graveyard. It is the engine that drives the world. The master builders command great respect, but also face great danger. The deep limestone chambers can be unstable. Accidents happen. Ceilings collapse. When a worker gets hurt, construction stops. With Egypt at war, Ramoses can't afford to get behind schedule, especially since the tide of battle is about to turn against Ramses. In Syria near Kadesh, Ramses and his army battle for their empire and their lives. The Hittites, fierce